What we're going to be working on today is part 3 of the section 9.4. And in the past, what we did was we solved for some of these equations. So for example, the other day, what we did was we took these and we did x minus 5 equals 0, x minus 4 equals 0, we added 5, we ended up with x equals 5. And then on this one, we added 4, and we had x equals 4. So here are some of the things that we worked in the past. We set each one of those sets, this one equal to 4, and then we set this section equal to 0, and then x minus 4 we set equal to 0, and then we solved. And that was done a couple of days ago. Yesterday what we did was we found greatest common factor. And so we took the two terms in the polynomial. So here was the first term. What we did was we did the factor tree. We set out all the factors. Then we took the second term, which is 40y. We factored it out with the factor tree. And then what we did was we were like, okay, what do they have in common? Okay, first of all, they had this 2 in common, and so then I wrote down the 2. And then I had another 2 that was in common, and I wrote down a 2. And then finally we had the third 2 in common, and then we wrote that 2 down, and 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. So that's how I got the greatest common factor of 8. In the second problem, what we did was the same type of thing. We had the first term, which was 6x squared. Then we had the second term, which is 30x cubed. We used the factor trees, and you're going to also notice that we took the x squared and we said it was x times x. We had x cubed and we did x times x times x. And notice that this x was in common, and so we put that here. This x was in common, so we put this here. When we multiplied the 2 times 3, we ended up with the 6, and then we ended up with the x squared. And so that was greatest common factor. Today what we're going to do is a little bit like the culmination of all those things. This is section 9-4 part C. And what makes this different is we need to solve, but it's not as easy as in step A, where it was all set up. What we have to do on these is we have to get it all set up, and then we need to solve it. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this, and we're going to do step 1. Step 1 is always going to be standard form. And you're going to notice that this is in standard form because everything is to one side, and you'll notice that x squared comes first right here, and then the x comes next. So it's something we've learned in the past. You should understand what standard form means. Sometimes they're in standard form, sometimes they're not. This one is, so it's easier. The second step that we're going to do is we're going to find the greatest common factor. So we're doing what we did yesterday. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my first term, which is 3x squared, and I'm going to write 3x squared equals, and you're going to notice that 3 is prime, and if you remember, prime means that only one in itself can go into it. So I'm going to go 3 times x, because x squared means that there are 2 x's that I multiplied together. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take I wanted to highlight that. I'm going to take 15x, that's the second term, and I need to break down 15 because that can be broken down into more factors. So 15, when I break it down, is 3 and 5. I'm going to circle both of them because they're prime. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go 3 times 5 and then times x because there's only one x. This is a great review from what we did yesterday. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go greatest common factor equals, and I got to look at what factors do they have in common. You're going to notice that they have a set of 3's, so I'm going to circle it and put a 3. And they also have a set of x's, so I'm going to circle that down. And that is my greatest common factor. So right now, I am doing nothing different than what I did in previous problems. The next step is different, however. This next step, I like to call the leftovers. I think of like Thanksgiving, and you know, you have your Thanksgiving feast and you have all this turkey, and sometimes the best part of that is your leftovers. It's what you don't circle. So what I'm going to do first of all with leftovers is I'm going to take my greatest common factor from up above and I'm going to put it there. So you'll notice this right here comes down there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a parenthesis and I'm going to go back up to that 3x squared. I'm going to go right, and I'm going to highlight it for you. I'm going to go right here and I'm going to look at this. And I'm going to look at what didn't I circle. Well, you're going to notice right here, I didn't circle that term. I circled the 3, I circled the x, but I did not circle that other x. So that is a leftover. So I'm going to come down and I'm going to write the x here, that's the leftover. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to the original problem, and you're going to notice that there's a sign in between those two terms, that plus sign. So I'm going to use that. That's a leftover. And I'm going to bring that down here, and I'm going to put it right there in my leftovers category. Then I'm going to look at the second term. And in the second term, 15x, you're going to notice that the 5 was leftover. So I'm going to put that here. And then I'm going to finish with a parenthesis. So that is the leftovers. Again, I got the x because it was the leftovers from the first term. I got the plus sign because that was the leftovers in the equation. And I got the 5 because it was the leftovers in the second term. And that's our leftovers. The final step, step 5, step 4. Ooh, I can't count. I'm going to actually solve. And this step you've done before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 3x and I'm going to set it equal to 0. You're going to notice that that is this part right here. That's my 3x. Then I'm going to take that pink one and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go x plus 5 equals 0. This is from part A, from the very first day when we started this section. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve. So to solve for x on this one, notice that there's multiplication between the 3 and the x. I'm going to divide by 3. So I end up with x equaling 0. On this problem, I'm going to subtract 5. And so x equals negative 5. So you're going to notice that there are two answers again, where x equals 0 and x equals negative 5. All right, let's go to the next problem. And in this problem, again, step 1 was standard form. You might want to, off to the side, write a list of the steps, and I can redo that for you. Number 1, standard form. The second step is greatest common factor. The third step is your leftovers. And then the fourth step is to solve. So those are your 4 steps, and that'll help you solve those problems. So first of all, if I take a look at this problem, you're going to notice that it is not in standard form. So what we're going to do is we're going to subtract 24b. And the reason why we're subtracting 24b is because 9, this 9 right here, that is our line leader. And again, we don't want that to be negative. We want that to be positive. So I'm going to end up going 9b squared minus 24b equals 0. And again, they're not like terms, so I can't add them together because the 9b is squared and then the 24 is just b. So that is our standard form. We're done with step 1. Now let's go to step 2. Step 2 is to find the greatest common factor. So I'm going to take the first term, which is 9b squared, equals, 9 is not prime. So I'm going to come over here, grab my 9. I get 3 and 3. I'm going to circle those. I'm going to come over here, write 3 times 3, and then there's also 2 b's because it's b squared. I'm going to take the second term, which is 24. Notice that I'm grabbing 24b. I'm not grabbing negative 24. I'm just grabbing a positive because we're going to use that sign later for our leftovers. So I'm going to take 24b. I'm going to come over here and look at my 24. And again, 24 can be broken down several different ways. I'm going to choose 4 and 6. Neither of them is prime. So 4 is 2 times 2. 6 is 2 times 3. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to line them up then. I'm going to come over here and go 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times, and there's 1b. So now I'm going to grab my greatest common factor, and I'm going to circle a set of 3's, and I'm just going to grab these because they're next to each other. I could have grabbed the first 3 in the section, but I'm going to grab those. I write my 3, and then I'm going to grab my b's. So that's my greatest common factor. Now that I'm done with greatest common factor, my next step, it tells me to do my leftovers. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to first of all write my greatest common factor, 3b. And notice how I'm kind of doing each step at a time, and I like to put lines between each step just so that it makes it easier to organize. Now I need to take a look at the first term and see what I have for leftovers. So 9b squared, I have a 3 and I have a b that I did not circle. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to write 3b. Then I need to grab my sign. So I'm going to go back up here to my standard form, and there's that negative. I wanted to make negative 24. I didn't because I'm going to use that here. So I'm going to put my negative here. Then I need to go down and take a look at my leftovers. So I got a 2, a 2, and a 2. So 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8. So there's my leftovers. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve. So I'm going to go 3b equals 0. That's my first term. And the other term in parentheses is 3b minus 8. And I'm going to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to divide by 3. b equals 0. That's my first answer. Now it just happens that that's going to be our first answer. That's not always true, but it is with this case. And then over here I'm going to add my 8. 3b equals 8. And then I'm going to divide by my 3. And I end up with b equals. Now you're going to have to use your calculator on this. You can write it as 2 2/3, or if you want to, you could go 2.6, but make sure you get that repeat bar over the top. That's going to be really important. Don't just write 2.6 or 2.7. And those are our two answers. All right, that's it for today. Good luck. If you have any questions, definitely let me know.